The chains are cold. She does not flinch. 18 years of practice, and stillness is the only armor that has never failed her. This hall she knows. Its floors her hands have swept, its wine they have carried. Every corner of it stood in while the vampire king above her spoke of bloodlines as though she carried none. More than she has needed anything, she needs to stay invisible now. Against her ribs, the bracelet her mother pressed into her 6-year-old hands the night she died is warm. Whatever is rising inside her will not be stopped. When it breaks, the man at the far end of this hall will finally see her. Whether she survives being seen, she does not know. That it will change everything she does. If you have ever made yourself invisible to protect someone who did not know they needed protecting from you, you already understand what this costs. Stay with her. Subscribing keeps this door open. 6 years old, and the understanding arrived all at once. Not from what the mob called her, which was abomination, which was wrong thing, which was do not let it get away. Those words she understood well enough. The particular understanding that changed the shape of her and did not change back was simpler, what she cost. Fast Maria was. Through the burning street she moved with the economy of someone who had run before, who had committed to a direction, and was spending nothing on regret. Before the front door broke, Qetsiyah was already out the back. 3 blocks in, her feet finally touched the ground. In the California dark, the smell of burning dry grass followed them through every alley, and underneath it, the smell of the people who had set the fire. At a wall she stopped. Stone, old, running along the base of a hill where the lights of a great house glittered above the tree line. Crouching in front of Qetsiyah, taking her face in both hands, she said, "Listen." Her voice was even, not calm, even, which is a different thing. The gate is around the corner. Go through it. Follow the smell of food. There will be someone in the kitchen. Do not run. Walk. Mama, Qetsiyah said. From inside her collar came the bracelet. Gold, fine and old, with a clasp repaired twice. Into Qetsiyah's palm she pressed it and closed both her hands around it. Find him, she said. His name is Dorian. He lives in that house. He will know this bracelet. He will know you. Behind them, voices. Close now. Mama. This time, not a question. Go, Maria said. The way she said everything important, with no room for argument inside the word. One hard kiss to Qetsiyah's forehead, and then she turned to face the alley. Away Qetsiyah went, without looking back. In the moment those hands left her face, she had understood that looking back was not something she had been asked to do. Unlocked, the gate was. The kitchen garden smelled of rosemary and damp soil, the particular coolness of Northern California earth before dawn. To the garden wall she walked, sat against it, the bracelet closed in her fist, and the bracelet was so warm she thought for a long time that it was the warmth of her mother's hands still on it, transferred. A woman found her there as the sky went gray. Heavy-footed, with a ring of kitchen keys at her hip and flowers still on her sleeves. Down at Qetsiyah for a long moment she looked, and did not ask any of the questions that would have required difficult answers. Come inside, then, she said. Nesta was her name. About the bracelet she did not ask. It was not offered. In the lining of the thin mattress in the room above the kitchen, it was hidden that morning. 3 months before she took it out again. And when she did, a decision had formed without full words yet. Find him when it was safe. Be careful about what safe meant. Stay. 18 years had a specific weight. In small daily increments it settled, the accumulated pressure of 10,000 choices made in the direction of invisibility. Every morning the dried yarrow and the gray-barked root were ground into tea that made the wolf scent go flat and human. The taste of the back of a medicine cabinet. Not once was a morning missed. Memorized, the castle had become. Not deliberately, the way someone studied a floor plan, but gradually, the way a body learned a house it had lived in long enough. By accident, by repetition, by the slow accumulation of which floors creaked and which corridors permitted movement without being noticed. The east passage kept her within earshot of the main gallery without crossing the sight line from the dais. The south kitchen, in trance, brought her into the great hall in 40 seconds. How long she could stand in a room with Dorian before the air between them became something she had to actively manage, she knew precisely. Not once in 18 years had she placed herself where speech was required. Across the great hall at council gatherings he was glimpsed, a figure of pale hair and complete stillness at the head of a long table. His voice she had heard in the east corridor once, clear and carrying, and for the full 2 minutes it took to pass, she had stood motionless in the kitchen doorway. What that vigilance was she had never let herself name. Not something she examined. Waiting for the right moment, she told herself. 18 years of it, and she had become very good at mistaking waiting for peace. Full the great hall was that evening. 200 years of dominions quarter-ranged in rows, every face toward the dais. Along the south wall she moved with a wine tray, refilling glasses, making herself the background the room required. At the front of the hall he stood. The long way around the second row she took. 3 extra feet between them, and the long way around things had been her approach for 18 years. Not directly at him did she look. Her peripheral vision, she used the way a person used dark-adapted eyes in an unlit room, without looking at the thing itself, without acknowledging what she was doing. Pale hair, the set of his shoulders, the way a room went quiet before he spoke. His intention to seek a marriage alliance with House Aiden, he announced. The court applauded. That sound rose to the vaulted ceiling and came back down. Walking, she kept. The glass at the end of the third row she refilled without spilling. Her hand was perfectly steady. Not what a marriage alliance with House Aiden meant for the arrangement she had built her life inside was she thinking about. Not his voice, or the way the applause had sounded like something being sealed. The smell from Lord Aiden's table was what occupied her. Green and faintly medicinal as she had passed, layered over something darker. Something that smelled less like food and more like decision. Back toward the kitchen, she turned it over, the way you turned over a sound you had heard before and could not yet place. By the time she reached the door, she knew what it was. The tray she set on the counter. Nesta looked at her face and said nothing. In the kitchen of the castle that had never been hers, she stood and tried to decide what to do with the fact that someone at Lord Aiden's table was carrying wolfsbane. Cold, the kitchen fire was when she reached it. Let out the night before, distracted, which was unlike her. Before anyone else woke, she rebuilt it, feeding wood to the embers by feel in the dark, and by the time the first kitchen boy appeared at 4:30, the range was lit and her hands had stopped shaking. Before midnight, she had confirmed the compound. Not a difficult identification for someone who had spent 18 years working with the chemistry of concealment. Wolfsbane prepared for gradual administration had a particular smell at full concentration, bitter at the front, faintly resinous at the back, with the specific green note of something dried quickly rather than aged. In dilution, the green note dropped away, and what remained could pass for an herbal tincture in a lord's wine, something medicinal enough to dismiss. At the residual level she had caught it. Whatever Lord Aiden was carrying had been on his person for days, which meant he had brought it with him, which meant this had been the plan before he arrived, before the announcement, before any of it. Not a decision made in the excitement of opportunity. Something prepared. Through the morning she worked on a kind of mechanical steadiness. Flour to measure, stock to skim, 300 rolls to shape before the midday service. All of it she did. Her hands knew the work without her mind. In low, sustained quantities, wolfsbane did not kill. Not a vampire of Dorian's age. What it did was slower and more useful. Dulled the upper registers of perception, blunted reflex, made a man find other people's suggestions reasonable. A door left ajar, botanically speaking. No breaking required. Through a space quietly opened, you walked. The marriage was the door. Across 2 days she watched them. Through council rooms and corridors she moved with a wine tray and a posture refined to the point of invisibility, tracking Ravia of House Aiden the way you track something you already knew was wrong, and were trying to understand precisely how. 26 or 27, young for a vampire court. Not beautiful in any obvious way, which was itself a kind of advantage. It meant people looked at her twice. Through rooms she moved the way someone did who had been told from childhood that rooms belonged to them, unhurried, deliberate, with the certainty of someone who had already decided how everything would end. His arm she touched twice on the first day. The second touch lasted a half-second longer than the first, barely perceptible, the kind of increment you measured only if you were already measuring. To neither did Dorian react. He did not smile or stiffen. He simply did not register it, which was worse than either response, the attention of a man whose perceptions had already been softened at the edges. 2 touches in a single day, at that increment, was not affection. It was calibration. The corridor encounter happened on the second morning. From the east wing Ravia came, which meant she had not been going anywhere particular. Learning the castle's routes. When she saw Qetsiyah, she stopped, and her face arranged itself into the particular warmth of someone who had decided, in advance, to be kind. "You're from the kitchen?" she asked. "I've noticed you." "I am," Qetsiyah said. "How long have you been at Dominion?" 18 years. Something that looked like admiration moved across Ravia's expression. "That's remarkable. You must love this place." A pause, looking around the corridor with the proprietary interest of someone cataloging what would soon be hers. "I hope the staff will be as loyal when things change. Good service is so hard to find." "Yes," Qetsiyah said. "It is." The smile she gave came from the same place her stillness did, practiced, clean, revealing nothing. Satisfied, Ravia smiled back and moved on. In the corridor after she was gone, Qetsiyah stood without moving for a long moment. Through the east window the morning light came and lay across the stone floor in one pale strip. Somewhere in the wing above, the particular sound of Dorian's household beginning its day, footsteps, a door, the low voice of someone reading aloud from a report. About the smile she had just given, she was not thinking. About the phrase "things change" she was. Not if things change. When? That afternoon she went to Nesta. Not Wolfsbane did she call it. An unusual preparation in one of the visiting lord's bottles, she said, something medicinal brought into the estate without declaration, something the head of the guard should be aware of. Her voice, she kept steady, her reasoning brief. Specific enough to be credible. Careful enough not to implicate herself. Nesta took the message and brought back an answer before supper. The head of the guard thanked her for her concern. Appropriate note would be taken of any unusual items in future inventory checks. Further observations could be raised through the household steward. Washing a pot when she received this, she washed it 3 times. The water went cold around her wrists, and she did not notice until her hands started to ache. On her apron she dried them. The cloth left red marks across her knuckles. That night in her room above the kitchen, on the edge of the bed she sat and turned the bracelet over in the dark. Gold, fine and old. The clasp repaired twice. Found him, she had. That part of the promise she had kept. 3 rooms away from him for 18 years, close enough to hear his voice through stone, close enough to have built an entire life inside the shape of his presence. Finding was not the same as being found. What to do once she got here, Maria had not said. When young enough to think this way, she had believed finding him would be the whole of the task, that the rest would follow. 18 years had taught her the rest did not follow. The rest was something you had to choose, and she had spent 18 years choosing not to. Tomorrow, Lord Aiden's delegation was dining privately with Dorian. The kitchen order she had seen that morning. Not on the service list she was. Found him she had. For 18 years, that was enough. It was no longer enough. She has stayed silent for 18 years. Some silences are survival. Some silences become the thing that almost kills the person you were staying quiet to protect. If you have ever felt the weight of a silence gone too long, stay with her. Women who know that cost her here. Subscribing keeps you among them. An hour before the first guests, she arrived. Not yet warm with people, the great hall was, and the smell before a gathering had its own quality. Beeswax and cut stems and the faint mineral trace of stone cleaned with something acidic, the smell of a room prepared without yet becoming what it was being prepared for. To the south wall she moved, took her position, stood still, and the state she was standing inside was not fear exactly. Something closer to the particular clarity that came when a person had run out of patience with their own plan, and what remained was just the thing itself. Not because the night before had forced her hand was she here. A decision she had made in a cold kitchen, and not the kind of woman who unmade though she was. In waves the guests arrived. With the trays and the glasses she moved, and the wolfsbane she tracked the way she tracked everything, without looking directly at it, cataloging what was peripheral, registering what was wrong. 40 minutes it took to find it. A decanter, not from the estate's cellar inventory. That inventory she knew. 18 years of carrying bottles from it had given her that. Through the East Service entrance at 7 this one had come, carried by a young man she did not recognize, moving with the particular confidence of someone who had been told exactly where to go and knew that being recognized was not part of the plan. Through 2 rooms she tracked him. The rehearsed ease of someone repeating a task was on him, its own kind of information. For Dorian's table he was heading. Before him she reached it, set her tray at the east edge, and positioned herself at the place his route required him to pass. When he came within arm's reach, "This wine is for the private anteroom," she said. "This table uses the North Cellar Reserve." Back at her he looked. Back at him she looked, with the expression she used when the answer was not up for debate. The decanter he took back the way he had come. The tray she picked up. She turned. Looking at her, he was not within his sight line had she placed herself. Certain of the angle she had been. By 3 feet she had been wrong. Closer than she had calculated he was. Close enough that the air between them carried the quality of his presence. She had spent 18 years managing from a distance, the specific weight of him that had never diminished no matter how many times she had stood in this hall on the other side of it. At her he was looking the way people looked when something in the background had moved, and they were trying to determine whether they had imagined it. She did not run. Long ago she had learned that running was what made people look harder. "The wine for this table," she said. "The North Cellar Reserve is better for a celebration of this kind." Her gaze he held. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. "Bring it, then," he said. She went. Narrow and cold, the kitchen stairs were, and on the 4th step from the bottom, she sat down because her legs had decided to before she had. Her palm flat against the wall she pressed. The stone was cooler than her hand. The adrenaline of the intercept, she told herself it was. The effort of moving across a full room, calculating routes, managing 3 variables at once to pull the decanter away without drawing attention, she told herself that too. Nothing to do with the 4 seconds he had looked at her. An hour her hands did not stop shaking. This she noticed the way you noticed a problem you had decided not to have. She kept moving. Before she moved, she had not checked the room. That had been the mistake. The decanter she had tracked, Dorian she had tracked, the angle of her own position she had tracked, and the one other thing she should have done she had not done, which was look for Aiden. With a North Cellar Reserve, she came back into the hall, set it at Dorian's table, and as she moved back toward the service wall, she let her attention find Aiden. On the far side of the room, he stood with a small group, in partial profile, in conversation. Nothing in his posture suggested he was watching her specifically. On her, his eyes were not moving, not reacting, just on her, with the particular attention of someone who had noted a piece of information and was deciding what to do with it. Before she reached the wall, he turned back to his conversation. Everything she needed to see she had already seen. An error she had made. A contained one, but in the kind of life she had built here, contained errors were the only kind that did not forgive themselves, because they were the kind a man with Aiden's patience chose to remember. The shift she finished. trays she carried and glasses she cleared, and through the rest of the evening she moved with the specific discipline of someone managing the distance between what they knew and what they could show. Late the ball went. She did not leave early. In the East Service corridor 2 hours after the ball ended, a final tray in her hands on the way to the kitchen, she heard voices through the stone wall. She did not slow, did not stop walking, stopped tracking the sound of her own footsteps. Ravia's voice first, then a pause, then Aiden's at a register she had not heard in the hall, lower, without the performance of patience. How long has she been at the estate? Ravia answered immediately. 18 years. A silence followed. The quality of that silence was specific. Interesting, Lord Aiden said. The rest of the way to the kitchen she walked, set the tray down without looking at it, and went upstairs. On the edge of her bed, she sat with the bracelet in her hand and turned it over in the dark, and she thought about what it meant to have been seen twice in one night. Once by the right person, which had been terrifying in a way she had no name for yet. Once by the wrong one, which was something else, practical and cold and requiring a response she did not yet have. The bracelet was warm in her palm. It had always been warm. For 18 years, she had been invisible. The problem with finally being seen was that she could not choose who was watching. Before dawn, she wrote the letter. Part of the night, she had spent working out what to say and how much of the truth to include, which meant spending the other part working out what kind of words a person with her standing could safely use. Not her name. Not that. What she had smelled, what the compound would do to a vampire's perceptions in sustained low quantities, and what the likely timeline was before it crossed from manageable to irreversible, that the letter contained. In the same hand she used for inventory records, she wrote it and put it into the kitchen supply chain that would reach Corvin's desk by 9. By 8 it reached him. Nesta told her at noon. Already known by then, the result was. To Dorian, Corvin had mentioned it. Had anyone known who sent it? Dorian asked. No one did. 12 minutes the investigation had lasted. At the kitchen counter she stood and held that information. Precise intelligence about a specific threat she had provided, delivered through a route chosen for its reach and its credibility, and the question the intelligence had generated was, who is the source? Not act on this. Not investigate the compound. Who sent it? So invisible she was that even her warnings had no author. For 18 years she had understood this in the abstract. Her concealment she had built to be thorough, and it had been. Not occurring to her in the building was that the same precision would make it impossible to step forward when stepping forward was the only option left. The next morning she went to the head of the guard. Breslin was his name, and with Dominion he had been for 20 years. Requesting an audience through the kitchen's administrative channel had taken most of the morning and produced a time the following day, already too close to the signing ceremony. At his door at the given time, she went, and in the corridor outside it, she sat for 2 hours on a wooden chair placed specifically for waiting, which told her this was a place people waited often and were not necessarily received. At the 2-hour mark he came from the stairwell, moving quickly, papers under one arm. She stood. Past her and into his office. Without breaking his stride, he walked. The door closed. She stood in the corridor for a moment. She sat back down. Then she stood again and walked back to the kitchen. By accident, the corridor encounter happened. To the East Passage storage, she was carrying an empty tray when she turned the corner, and he was there. Alone, reading something, standing in the particular way people stood when they needed to process before they could move. He looked up. Through the east window at mid-morning the light fell at a specific angle, and she had a fraction of a second in which she could have turned. She did not. Her feet had already stopped. In his full attention she was 3 feet away, and this was the moment she had been working toward for days. Her mother's face in the light of a California fire she thought about. The first sentence and all the sentences that would have to follow it. What it meant to say to the man in front of her. I know about the wolfsbane, I know about Aiden, I know because I can smell things you cannot, and I can smell them because I am not what the records in this house say I am. I am something else entirely. I am the thing that people who loved me tried to kill. A sentence to begin with that did not pull the whole of it behind it she could not find. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she said. "I thought you were someone else." Her gaze he held for a beat that was slightly too long for the words she had said.
"Did you?" he said.
He walked on. After he left, she stood in the passage, and the morning light moved across the stone floor, and she turned around and walked back to the kitchen and put the tray down and went upstairs. That night with the bracelet in the dark, she sat and turned it over in her hands. The gold was warm. It had always been warm. "Find him," her mother had said, "in an alley with a fire behind them and no time left." Found him, she had. That part of the promise she had kept. 3 rooms away from him for 18 years, close enough to hear his voice through stone, close enough to have built an entire life inside the shape of his presence. Finding was not the same as being found. What to do once she got here, Maria had not said. Young enough once to believe finding him would be the whole of the task, she had thought the rest would follow. 18 years had taught her the rest did not follow. The rest was something you had to choose, and she had spent 18 years choosing not to. In the morning, the shelf was empty. In front of it she stood for a moment. The clay jars, the yarrow, the gray-barked root, the exact order she kept them in.
Gone.
In their place, a small bundle wrapped in kitchen twine. Under her nose, she held it and breathed in. Almost right. Yarrow at the front and something botanical underneath. In her fingers she turned it and inhaled again, and at the base note, under the careful similarity, something was wrong. Not botanical. Approximated. The difference between a handwritten original and a copy, where the shapes were correct but the pressure was off. The bundle she set down. Which shelf, whoever had placed this had known. What she used they had known. What she needed it to smell like they had known. In front of it she stood for a long moment. One day she had until the signing ceremony. Every route available to her she had used. Without the herbs today, her scent would be noticeable before noon, and what the court would notice would be the question she had no standing to answer. Not ready for that question she was. Not ready for what came after it. To choose the moment herself was the alternative. That moment she had not yet found. The bundle she picked up. That picking it up was exactly what someone wanted her to do, she knew. She took the herbs anyway. By the window she drank the tea, watching the California hills go pale gold in the morning light, and she thought, one more day. One more day. To find a way through. Since before Ravia found her, the wrong herbs had been working. By 8 that morning she had felt it, a restlessness under her ribs that was not the usual morning suppression. Something else. A pull, more insistent, like a tide coming in faster than the moon warranted. Still she kept and did her kitchen work, and by the time Ravia appeared at the kitchen garden door, the effort was already costing her something she could not afford. "You don't look well," Ravia said. At her Qetsiyah looked. "I know a healer," Ravia continued. Her voice had the particular warmth of someone who had practiced this conversation. "Near the estate. She could see you before the ceremony." For one more moment she looked at her. What this was she knew exactly. What the wrong herbs were the morning she found them she had known, and taken them anyway, which meant somewhere under the decision she had known this was where they were aimed. Not because she had been convinced did she say yes. Because he would be in the great hall within the hour, and the only person in this castle who knew what was in his cup was her. "All right," she said. Across the estate the walk took 7 minutes. Brown with late summer dry were the California hills beyond the grounds, the grass the color of old straw, and the morning air carried the faint salt of a coast she couldn't see from here, but knew was close. Beside Ravia she walked and did not speak. Each step was a small version of the same choice. Not running, not hiding, going towards something she could see clearly because it was the only door that led into the room where she needed to be. Her mother she thought about. Not the night of the fire. The other things she remembered about Maria, the specific quality of her stillness in moments of danger. Toward a fight, Maria had never run. She had walked toward them, at the pace of someone who had already accepted the terms. Courage, she had spent years calling it. Something simpler, she now thought, The knowledge that what was coming could not be outrun, and the decision not to waste the time before it arrived. Not where they arrived. The healer's house was open. The great hall's east doors were. The court was assembled. Time she had to register this, to see the rows of faces and the dais and the specific arrangement of people who had been told to be here and knew why, before the doors closed behind her. On the marble floor, in the middle of it she stood. His voice she heard before she saw him step forward. Aiden had the voice of a man delivering a prepared statement, the precise cadence of someone who had considered every word and was now spending them carefully. A creature living inside Dominion's walls for 18 years under false pretenses, he told the court. A hybrid of two incompatible bloodlines, a thing the natural order had not intended. A corruption and a risk to the king, the court, and the line of succession. Abomination he used twice. The second time he said it, the room went a particular kind of quiet. What the word was for, she understood. 6 years old the first time someone used it to describe her she had been, and never once had it changed what she was. Something almost restful, she thought, about a room full of people trying to name a thing they could not stop. Not to any of it did she react. 2 guards came forward with the chains. Silver links and iron links worked together, the metal catching the light. 2 chains for a two-natured thing. With the attention of someone cataloging information, she looked at them and felt, distantly, that this was the most precise description anyone in this room had offered her in 18 years. Two-natured. As if there were a shortage of her. Across the hall at Dorian, she looked. At the far end of the marble he was, elevated on the dais, and wrong in the way she had been smelling him being wrong for days.
Pale.
The particular pallor of a system being asked to heal faster than it could, the wolfsbane compound accelerating now that he was upright, and the ceremony had his blood under a different kind of pressure. Across the distance his eyes found hers. Not at the chains was she looking. Not at Aiden or the court or Ravia, at the edge of her peripheral vision with the stillness of someone watching a plan complete itself. At his face was she looking. Whether his face would do what her mother's face had done, in a street in Northern California, in the light of a fire, 18 years ago, was what she was watching for. Done what they were designed to do, the wrong herbs had. Rising at a rate she could not manage was the shift, building since 8 that morning and accelerating now in the stress of the hall and the weight of what was in Dorian's blood. One layer of control she had left, and it would not hold long. Across the marble his gaze, she held. This was the stillness. Not the stillness of waiting. The stillness of a woman who had spent 18 years choosing one thing and was, for the first time, choosing the other. Her mother walking toward the alley, she thought about, not away from it. 18 years of the East Corridor and the gray-barked route and the precise management of 3 rooms' worth of distance between herself and the man on the dais. At him she looked. She let it go. Not like releasing something, it was more like stepping back and watching something that had always been there finally take up the space it was entitled to. The hall noise fell away. The room narrowed to the distance between her and the dais. Her vision sharpened in the way it only sharpened when she stopped fighting it. Colors came in harder. The marble floor registered differently under her. The air tasted of the specific sweat that came with dread. The court began to scream. Them she did not hear. For his face in the noise she was looking, across the marble, through the distance, through the fear that had organized her entire life, looking for what his face would do when it finally saw her. The beast of beasts she was, and her father was who she was looking for. Not a roar, the first sound the beast of beasts made. Silence. The specific silence of something that had been patient long enough to know that patience was over. Through the screaming court she moved with the directness of something compressed for 18 years and no longer interested in compression. The crowd parted, not because she asked it to, because things held back for very long moved with a certainty that bodies understood before minds did. Aiden she reached. Ravia she reached. At its source she removed the conspiracy, not with rage, but with the quiet efficiency of something that had made a decision and was now completing it. Rage would have been understandable. This was something else. Work carried out.
She stopped.
She turned.
Collapsed he had.
Before she saw it, she heard it. The change in his heartbeat from across the hall, the rhythm dropping into something wrong, the wolfsbane doing its last work now that his body had been running on stress and ceremony. The sound of his weight against the marble she heard before any guard moved. The guards moved to stop her. She did not stop. Across the hall at a pace that was not fast and not slow but simply continuous she moved, the pace of something that had made a decision and did not require permission to carry it out. Into her path the guards shifted. At them she looked, and at what was looking at them they looked, and they moved. She reached him. On the marble he was, his breathing shallow, the wolfsbane past the point where his body could outpace it. She knelt. What hybrid blood did in a body that wolfsbane had damaged she had known for some time. Whether she would be willing to use it, she had not known until this moment. Just enough her hand she shifted, and her wrist she pressed to his mouth and gave him her blood. Hybrid blood. Half of what he was. Half of what had killed his enemy. In him, she felt the wolfsbane begin to change. The smell of it shifted as it metabolized, the bitter green note going flat, the chemical edge losing its grip. His breathing changed. His color came back, slowly, and then faster. Around her, she held her shift while the court of Dominion watched in total silence. Not at the court did she look. She waited. When his eyes opened, she was still there. Still in her shifted form, still kneeling, still holding the space. From the torn pocket of her apron, she took the bracelet and held it up between them, close to his face, and she waited. His eyes found it. The focus returned in stages. The confusion of someone surfacing from underwater, then the room coming back, then her and then the bracelet between them, and then something else happened, something she was not prepared for, which was that his face moved. Not toward horror. Not toward recoil. At the bracelet, he looked the way someone looked at a thing they had not let themselves think about in a very long time, and then his breathing changed, not from the wolfsbane but from something he had been holding just as carefully as she had held her shift. "Maria," he said, quietly, like a door opening that had been closed for 18 years. "Maria's child," he said then.
She told me you would find me.
She said I would know you by this. His hand came up, shaking, and around the bracelet his fingers closed with the particular care of someone holding something they did not fully believe was real. From the bracelet to her face his hand moved then, and there it held, her shifted face with its wrong angles and its wrong eyes, and he did not flinch. His hand she needed to hold. Not the hand of someone reaching up from the floor, but his hand properly, the way you held the hand of someone you were not going to let go of. In this form she could not do that. The shift she let go. The way it had come it left, not with drama but with a settling, a kind of returning, and when it was done she was kneeling on the marble floor of the great hall of Dominion with her father's hand cupped around her face. He looked at her. Her name, he said. In this castle for 18 years she had been. 1,000 words she had heard him say. Through stone walls and across marble floors and from the far end of corridors memorized specifically to hear him from. Her name she had never heard him say. The way someone said a thing they had been carrying privately for a long time and had finally been given permission to say aloud, he said it. Something broke open in her chest at the sound of it. Not that she let it show. For 18 years she had been managing what was inside her, and she was not about to stop. Together she held herself until from the marble he reached up and pulled her down into his arms, and then she stopped trying. The court watched. What they were seeing they did not entirely understand. That was fine. He understood. If this story reached you, if something in it felt true, there are others like it here. Women who have been carrying something too long, who have lived 3 rooms away from the life they were meant to have. They are waiting in this channel. Subscribe and the next story finds you. The grave was in the California hills north of the estate, on a slope above the vineyards where the afternoon light came in low and turned everything the color of old honey.
For 18 years it had been maintained.
Not until he took her there, 2 days after the Court of Dominion rearranged itself around a truth it was still processing, had she known this. Together they stood beside it. For a long time he did not speak, and she did not ask him to. Toward the headstone, she held the bracelet out. No words had she prepared. 18 years with only her mother's voice and 3 words from it she had spent, and those 3 words she had held so carefully that she had forgotten there might be things she wanted to say in return. Found him, she told her mother. The promise she had kept. Finding was not the same as being found. It had turned out, but the second half had come anyway, in the end, in the great hall of a castle, in front of everyone, the way her mother would probably have chosen if she had been the one choosing. Over her shoulder, she felt his hand settle.
Warm. Certain.
She is home. Others like her are in this state. Women carrying the weight of what they are inside courts and houses that have not yet decided whether to accept them. Not all of them have a bracelet. Not all of them have a mother who left them a map.
She knows this now.
Some nights, she stands at the window of the castle that is finally and truly hers, watching the city lights spread below the northern hills, and she thinks about them. She hopes for those women that when the moment comes, there is someone worth the risk of being seen.